Welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of Vallecitos Water District on Wednesday, July 21st, 2021 at 5 p.m. Via video conferencing, as we have been doing for the last year and a half. I'm going to read a quick little note here. Pursuant to the executive orders issued by Governor Newsom, one or more board members may participate in tonight's meeting via video conferencing. And in this case, we all will be. I'll go ahead and ask Director Elitharp if you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Sure. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you, Director Elitharp. Okay, we'll conduct a roll call for attendance. Director Hernandez.
Here.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Here.
Director Elitharp.
Here.
Director Pennock.
Here.
Thank you. And I am here as well. So we got the whole team together. I'm assuming that since there's no public comment.
That's correct. Yeah, we have not received any comments from the public, and there are no members of the public in attendance.
Okay, thank you. And I'll entertain a motion to adopt tonight's agenda for the regular meeting, please.
Move to approve, Hernandez.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Pennock.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve tonight's agenda and by Director Hernandez and a second by Director Pennock. And we'll conduct another roll call vote. Director Pennock.
Yes.
Director Elitharp.
Yes.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Yes.
Director Hernandez.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we have a special presentation tonight. Tish Burge from the County Water Authority is here to speak to us. So it's all yours, Tish. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, President Snella. I appreciate it. And members of the board, General Manager Pruim and Legal Counsel Gilpin, thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. If I look familiar to you, you might recall I was most recently at Sweetwater Authority as their General Manager. So I came from the retail side, but now I'm in the wholesale side and excited to talk to you about our role in supporting you as you serve our ratepayers. Today, I'm going to talk briefly about that role and some of our top issues, and very much appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. So thank you very much. Is the presentation already provided, or do I need to share my screen?
Why don't you go ahead and share your screen, Tish?
Okay, just one moment while I make that happen. Thank you. Very good. And if you can see my screen, can you give me a thumbs up? Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So many of you know the Water Authority, but for those of you who don't, or those you might want a refresher, I'll give a really brief overview. The Water Authority was formed in .77 to provide wholesale water to the region. And today we serve that to you and 23 other member agencies to serve 3.3 million people and an economy of $253 billion. So our board consists of 36 governing members to do that. So thank you to Director Elitharp for your governance and leadership for the board. We have sunshine and spades here in the region, but we don't have a lot of local assets to provide water. And so that's why we've worked strategically and collaboratively with our member agencies to diversify our water supplies and ensure that we have some local control for our region. And as we saw during the last two droughts, this approach has helped us secure sufficient supplies for our homes, our businesses, our agricultural community in dry years, similar to what we're experiencing now. Our main service to you comes from providing you with a safe, reliable source of water. For some of our member agencies, this is their only supply, while for others, it's supplemented with local supplies. But either way, the end result is the same, a diversified portfolio for our region. And that helps us to be able to make it through droughts like what we're experiencing right now. So one of the ways that we got to this diversification was our ratepayers investment. And they invested in new supplies. They invested in supporting changes in water use with programs and incentives, and they added to local storage. So I'm going to share some information about the diversified portfolio with special attention on our most affordable supply, which is called the Quantification Settlement Agreement Conserved Water, or QSA Conserved Water, and our newest supply, Seawater Desal. So the QSA Conserved Water is the nation's largest ag to urban conservation and transfer agreement, and it provides high priority water to San Diego County. The transfer agreement is under contract until 2047, and the canal lining is under contract until 2112. And that provides about half of the water for our portfolio. The Seawater Desal is our most newest supply that was brought online in 2015. It provides 50 million gallons per day of drought-proof water, and that provides just about 8% of our local supplies here. What we've seen in the last several decades is that our customers are using less water. And so the per capita water use has gone from 235 gallons per person per day in 1990 to just 120 today. And that's more than a 50% drop. So in addition to diversifying the supplies and our members conserving, we also have members like Vallecitos providing recycled water and making sure that that also makes us more resilient and ready for drought as we are now. So just to share some of the infrastructure that made all of this possible, this is the infrastructure that our ratepayers have invested in, and it's been to expand storage, it's been to move water around the county, as well as to diversify our supply. We have expanded storage with the Leeuwenhoek Dam and the San Vicente Dam raise, and we built a state-of-the-art treatment plant in order to improve our region's ability to treat raw water and to give us more control over those costs. And we also built the infrastructure necessary to move water into and out of Lake Hodges. And as an added benefit, we included a on-demand power supply associated with that to help meet the region's energy needs. The Water Authority is proud to advocate for the region and its residents, and you, our member agency, on behalf of all of the member agencies. And we do this with the Sacramento and DC advocacy team that works closely with staff to advocate during this drought, as well as also advocating for funding, educating about regional shovel-ready and shovel-worthy projects, and exploring opportunities to protect our regional agricultural industry. So in response to the recent drought in particular, we've been communicating on your behalf with the governor and state leaders by sharing information about the investments that the region has made, encouraging funding for local supply projects, meeting with top policy advisors in both the Senate and the Assembly, and supporting a regional approach taken by the governor while cautioning against a one-size-fits-all. And I'll talk a little bit more about the governor's proclamation towards the end of the presentation. Prior to the drought, we did support legislation or co-sponsored legislation in 3 areas I just want to share with you about. One was to make it easier for military veterans to apply their skills and experience towards the certifications that we require in our industry, certifications that are required to either treat water or to move water for our distribution operators. We also looked at legislation to help prevent agencies like Vallecitos to be forced to litigate over revenues collected for fire protection. And then lastly, to incentivize the use of recycled water, we included and advocated for incentives for potable reuse as well. In addition to these 3 items, we've also been advocating for rate relief for our ratepayers who experienced financial harm during the COVID pandemic. And that's also to make sure that you don't have write-offs associated with that. And so to help make sure that you're able to keep those ratepayer funds that you've collected for what you need them for, operating your facilities, operating your distribution system, treating water, and making sure that your operations run. We host a regular member agency member liaisons call to share the recent relevant information that we get from our lobbying team for legislative information. And so we want to thank Chris Robbins with the Vallecitos Water District, who's on your staff, and for participation and input on those calls. So in addition to advocacy, we also provide outreach and education assistance to the region. And we do this using a variety of approaches, and we're able to provide a unified message about the safe and reliable water that you deliver to our residents in the region. We do that through tools such as fact sheets, the Water News Network stories, and news from the chair. And in doing that, we're able to amplify your stories and also reach a larger audience in a timely manner. So through the monthly Joint Public Information and Conservation Meetings, affectionately called JPIC, we meet with your staff, we develop and refine our regional messaging, and we share information about the Water Authority resources and tools for their benefit and use. And we appreciate the involvement and input from Lisa Urabi on your team. Now, you may have heard about the silver tsunami, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing to help our member agencies in our region with regard to that challenge. There's approximately 4,500 water and wastewater jobs in the San Diego region, and yet we're finding that more than 40% of the individuals in those jobs are eligible to retire. And so based on that, we're anticipating about a 10% turnover per year, or 450 vacancies per year across our 50 water and wastewater agencies in the region. So understanding that that's a challenge for us, these are highly skilled jobs, these are trained jobs, our individuals have certification. We've been working with our member agencies and other regional and federal partners to implement several programs to develop our workforce and our future professionals. So thank you to General Manager Pruitt for sharing your expertise on our regional workforce development work group. And these are just 4 of the areas specifically where we've worked on that. DoD Skill Bridge is designed to help service members come into civilian life, and it allows them to work for an agency for 6 months with the agency not paying wages or benefits, and they're able to gain that expertise and be able to compete in the market. Also region-wide, we have a San Diego Water Works website, and that is a clearinghouse to help educate potential job seekers about our industry and what it takes to join the water industry, as well as postings of not only jobs here at the Water Authority, but at our 24 member agencies as well. And then for those positions that are dependent on certifications, like our water treatment plant distribution operators, we have an internship program that we run region-wide as well. And then lastly, to help prepare our future executives, we provided input into the region's first bachelor degree in public administration with a water works concentration, and the first cohort started just this last February. So looking back to some of the more challenging times, I just want to talk a little bit about the drought that we experienced in the 80s and 90s, and these are some of the headlines from this drought. You can see in the top corner that we were looking at a 50% cut for the region. Fortunately, we were spared that. We had the Miracle March rains, and that stopped us from having that cut. But we did end up with a 31% cut. And what's interesting about that is that cut originally was supposed to be 20% for our municipal customers and 50% for our ag customers. But the board at that time decided that that would be too much of a cut for our agricultural community. And so there was a melded agreement down to 31%. Now, even though there was agreement on that, our leaders of the board and community leaders, industry leaders, businesses, electeds came together and said, never again, that we don't ever want to be in this position again to have such a large cut. And so our Water Authority board responded with a directive to diversify our supplies, to be innovative in our infrastructure investments, while continuing to embrace a water conservation ethic. So fast forward to today, and I know you've been seeing a lot of coverage on the drought. Here are just some of the headlines that we've had recently. And so while we are experiencing dry conditions across the state, the good news is that the investments that the regions made that I outlined earlier have prepared us to have sufficient supplies for 2021 and beyond. And this is what our ratepayers are paying for in the bills that they pay to you: safe and reliable water, even when there's not a lot of water to go around. It's important to note that one of the reasons we're prepared for this is that our region has conserved. It's not just our individual customers, our those at home, but our businesses, our ag community. They've hardwired conservation into their way of doing business. And because of that reduced use, it's also helped make sure that we're prepared for this. Now, the governor did expand the drought declaration recently and proclaimed a state of emergency. He asked Californians to voluntarily reduce their use by 15%. So the mandatory restrictions in declaring drought, although it wasn't declared in Southern California and specifically San Diego, there is a voluntary request at this time. So while we are prepared for drought due to the sound planning and decades-long investments that our ratepayers have made, we also must do our part and be part of the statewide movement now underway to address water supply challenges in other parts of California. So we support the governor's call for the public to voluntarily cut back water use by 15%. And we do this in order to allow local, regional, and state water agencies to plan and take the steps necessary under these changed conditions to maximize the availability of limited water supplies going forward. And as such, on your behalf, we're working closely with you, with our wholesaler, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, over the next days, weeks, and months to design and implement strategies to maximize our water supply development in collaboration with the governor and state agencies in order to protect all of California. Thank you very much for having me today. I appreciated the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about how we're here for you, one of our 24 member agencies, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Stop sharing.
Oh, I was on mute. Thank you, Tish. Really appreciate the presentation. It was very informative. I'll open it up to my colleagues to see if there's any questions. And I see a couple hands. Director Elithart.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tish. I wanted to thank you as well. That was a great presentation. I'm sure all our board members.
You want me to make food? Yes, okay. I'm just listening.
I'm surprised this hasn't happened before. But it sounds like somebody's getting ready to cook dinner.
Yeah, I'm getting hungry. Anyway, I really appreciate it, Tish. I was wondering, I'm really excited about the change in leadership in Metropolitan. I was wondering if maybe you could say a few words about that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the Metropolitan Water District recently hired a new general manager, Adele Hatchkill, and he started just this July. So he's been there just a few weeks, and already we're seeing a dramatic change. I'm sorry, my light just went off. Okay, nothing like motion lights. So we've already seen a dramatic change. So for example, General Manager Curl here at the Water Authority went to her member agency manager meeting recently. It was in person. Adele had a agenda that looked different than it had ever looked before. He wanted to hear from the member agency managers about their concerns and their issues. He has an open dialogue with our general manager, which is a breath of fresh air, as well as he's come down already and addressed our board. So we're seeing a lot of behaviors that are extremely encouraging. I had the opportunity to meet him myself, and I was so impressed. Such an intelligent, thoughtful, open-minded, and an excellent listener. I just found him delightful.
Thank you.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate venue to ask this, but some of my constituents are asking. They're willing to cut back the 15% on the water, and they're doing that. But they're also asking me, they recognize that agriculture uses a greater proportion of the water. So can you talk a little bit about what's being asked of agriculture as well, or what could potentially be happening in the near future with agricultural customers, either in our area or, farther north in the Central Valley? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. At this time, the governor's request is of every Californian, regardless of what your profession, what your business. So the 15% is a voluntary ask of every single entity, including our agricultural community. Locally here in San Diego County, we have a program called the Permanent Special Agricultural Water Rate Program. And that program is open to agricultural businesses of a certain size who register. And what they're able to get from that is they're able to get a lower cost of water in exchange for less reliability. So should the region have cuts, which we are advocating against, just to be clear, but should we cut to that stage, then there's an understanding already and a agreement in place that there would be a cuts in and less reliability to those individuals who had enrolled in that program in exchange for lower water rates.
Great. Thank you, Tish. Are there any other questions from my colleagues?
Yes,
Director Hernandez.
yes, Tish, nice presentation. Thank you very much. Great always to get a refresher. A couple of things. I know you guys are embarked on the study for a new pipe to the Colorado River. I'm a board member at Encina, and we're sending 22 million gallons of water to the ocean every day, and which is obscene in my opinion. And I, as well as other board members, have been pushing for a reclaimed water facility on our south parcel. And I'm wondering, have you and your board members talked about a support of that kind of a facility?
That's a fantastic question. And I have a special affection for Encino Wastewater Authority. That's where I started my public sector career as Director of Environmental Compliance back in the early 2000s. So what we've done is we are advocating at the state level for potable reuse projects and for streamlined regulations that would make it easier for Encino Wastewater Authority and our other wastewater entities such as San Alejo Joint Powers Authority, and of course, the city of San Diego and others throughout the county. I don't want to leave out Escondido's, HARF or others, but we're advocating on the regulatory side to try to streamline those potable reuse regulations, including direct potable reuse, to make those projects more viable and available and make that water accessible to the region instead of going out of that ocean outfall, like you pointed out, Director Hernandez.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Tish, thanks again for joining us tonight. I think the drought is top of mind for all of us and everybody that's involved in water in our region. And I think we're all in agreement that we do not want to take the cookie cutter approach that the governor, I think it was Governor Brown during the last major drought, took. And hopefully with our investments that we've made locally here in San Diego County, we won't have to do that. But we really appreciate you coming and spending some time with us and providing us an update.
Thank you, President Snell. I appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, take good care.
Yep. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Tish, can you stop sharing before you go?
Yes, I'm now that I'm not answering questions, let me figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
It's a good cartoon though.
Okay, so we're going to move right along through our agenda here, and we're at the consent calendar. And all matters listed under the consent calendar will be voted upon by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or member of the public requests that a particular item be removed from the consent calendar, in which case it'll be considered separately under action items. I will entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent calendar or any items that need to be removed.
Move to approve consent calendar. Hernandez.
Thank you, Director Hernandez. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Director Elotart. We have a motion by Director Hernandez to approve tonight's consent calendar and a second by Director Elotart. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, I would like to remove item number 1.9 for
Okay.
separate discussion and vote. Thank you.
Okay, we will remove item 1.9 and we'll come back to that here in a second. We'll go ahead and conduct a roll call vote for the remainder of the consent calendar. Director Boyd Hodgson,
Yes,
Director Hernandez,
Yes.
Director Elotart,
Yes,
Director Pinnock,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Okay, we will discuss item 1.9 on the consent calendar, and I'll turn it over to you, Director Boyd Hodgson.
thank you, President Sala. So there are two employees that are employed by the district at the pleasure of the board. One is the general manager, and one is legal counsel, Mr. Gilpin. As we have discussed before, it is important for the board to be able to evaluate these employees. I only received the past evaluation for Jim Gilpin a few moments ago by email. I have not had the opportunity to evaluate Mr. Gilpin. His contract apparently expired in March. The last evaluation, according to our board packet, required, had some areas of competency, but also some areas of improvement. There was a comment in the board packet saying that there has been a discussion and those items requiring improvement have been taken care of. However, I'm not privy to what those items of improvement have been or the discussions satisfying that they've been taken care of. I propose that we table this until we have had a more robust discussion. I don't feel like I am qualified to vote on an extension for an employee that we are using our ratepayer money to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to their law firm. I propose that I move that we table this to a time after we've all had the opportunity to review Mr. Gilpin.
So are you making a motion? Is that
I'm
what
making a
you said?
motion. Yes,
Okay, thank you. We'll see, is there a second? I'll ask again, I don't have, I'm working off a small screen. Is there a second to the motion? I'm not hearing a second. This is not common, so I'll seek direction, but does the motion just fail, Mr. Gilpin, for a lack of a second?
It does.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on this item or any other separate? We have to vote on this either yes or no, one way or the other, since we pulled it off and we approved all the other items. So is there any other discussion or any other motions?
Move to approve 1.9.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item 1.9 by Director Hernandez and a second by Director Elotart. With a motion and a second, we're open for further discussion, if there is any. Let me just scan the room here. I'll add my thoughts on it. While I agree with Director Boyd Hodgson that there's an opportunity to improve our overall assessment and evaluation processes, I feel like we have had a recent, I think it was last year, if I recall correctly, a recent evaluation of BBK and Mr. Gilpin's performance. And I understand that we have some new board members and they haven't maybe had the opportunity to have as much experience or opportunity to evaluate those services. But I think, holding that up at this time to continue their their service with us, and especially given that in the light that their contract had already expired. I think it's important. It's more important that we keep moving forward with them for this year extension, but at the same time enhancing our overall evaluation process for both of the positions that you mentioned, that we're responsible for. That's just my thoughts. That's why I'm going to vote yes on this, but I just wanted to share for the public where my head was on that. And if there's no other discussion, Director Boyd Hodgson.
Clarification. So we extend a 1-year agreement from March or from now?
That's a good question. Can we clarify that? Either General Manager or Legal Counsel?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. This is General Manager Pruitt. So the item before the board would be to extend it by 1 year from the date that it would initially expire. So that would be March of 22. This would extend it until.
So
And then-
another 8 months or whatever.
Correct. It wouldn't be for another 12 months. It would be 12 months from the date of the expiration. And then at that point in time, the board would be faced with another decision. Do they want to extend it for 1 more year? As the staff report shows, the initial agreement was for 3 years, and there were 2 1-year extensions permissible. So the one in front of the board tonight is the first of those 2 1-year extensions.
Okay, March to March.
March to March, correct.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars of our ratepayer money that we are spending. And I don't feel qualified to extend the contract by 1 year, given I don't know what the evaluation has been in the past and what Mr. Gilpin's goals were and what he needed to improve upon in the last evaluation. I'm not sure why there is an urgency to do this tonight, since the contract expired in March. It seems that if we could just wait another couple of weeks and between now and then, distribute the evaluation to Director Pennock and myself, because we have not had the opportunity to evaluate Mr. Gilpin, that the 2 weeks won't make that much of a difference.
Thank you, Director Boyd Hodgson. Just point of clarification, where do we stand? This is another unique situation where, the contract has it expired, or is it what would happen if we don't take action?
So I would say, and Mr. Gilpin can join in on this, but the contract of the agreement officially expired in March, but BBK continues to provide the services under the same terms and conditions as the initial agreement. So there's been no lapse in services. So my feeling is if our board did not take an action on it tonight, it would just continue in that status. The BBK would continue to provide services under the existing terms and conditions of the agreement. And Mr. Gilpin, if you wanted to add in onto that, please do.
I have nothing to add, Glenn. That's the general situation.
Yeah, and I've expressed, my disappointment that we're even in this position directly to General Manager Pruitt, and I understand some of the unique circumstances as to why this fell through the cracks, for lack of a better way to put it. But for me, it's really important that it's going to be August before we know it, right? And we all know how fast time flies. We need to agendize, Glenn, at a meeting in August, September at the latest, an opportunity for the full board to discuss, another, because there's another extension possibility after this one, if this one were to pass tonight, or if it were to pass 2 weeks from now. That I don't want to be in a spot where we're playing catch up. I want to be proactive. I want to be ahead of it. I want to have that discussion from a full board standpoint of, are we going to do another second 1 year extension, or do we want to go out for an RFP at that time? And so I feel like those kinds of conversations they can't take place in February, right? So they need to take place in September timeframe. It's what I would think that, to provide ample time to be able to evaluate, to discuss. And then if we do go out to RFP, that's quite a process as well. That could take a couple, 2-3 months in of itself.
So President Sinella, if I may, this item was brought before the Legal and Legislative Affairs Committee, and we had a very similar conversation there. The committee members expressed concern that the deadline had passed. They wanted to make sure that it was brought to their attention before we're put in the same situation before next March, not before next July, right? So I already put something on my calendar. I think it was in the October timeframe to bring something back to the committee and then probably back through the board that would allow the board an opportunity to evaluate and determine if they want to go a different direction. Because if the board did want to change legal services, they would need to do it in a time that hopefully the whole process could be completed before the second or before this first 1-year extension is completed. So yeah, it does take time. We'd have to go out. First of all, the board would have to give direction, and then we'd have to put together some kind of a request for proposals, give time for firms to submit proposals, evaluate them, negotiate a contract, and award a new contract if that's what the board chose to do, all before the end of March of next year. So we can't wait until February of next year. That message was received from the Legal and Legislative Affairs Committee, and my recommendation is probably in the September, October timeframe, we could bring something forward to this board for further direction.
Yeah, thank you. And did the Legal and Legislative Committee have a recommendation for their full board? I guess I was not aware that they had vetted this issue.
They did. I believe it's in the staff report. I could refresh my memory, but at the Legal and Legislative Affairs Committee, they were supportive of the extending the contract by 1 year. And they did give us their support for that.
Okay. Right. And then just one other point, even if the board were to decide to go out for an RFP later this year, that doesn't necessarily mean that we've decided that we're going to change our legal services provider. It just means that we're going to vet and basically shop, right? And through that process, BVK could come out as the best value for the district still. So just because if we ever did go out to RFP, doesn't necessarily mean that we've made our mind up that we're going to make a change.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other discussions on this item? I don't see any hands. And my screen just went black, of course. Bear with me. This has been a night of technical difficulties. There we are. Welcome back. I don't see any other or hear any other discussion, and so we'll vote on the matter at hand, item 1.9. And we had, if I recall correctly, a motion to approve as presented by staff by Director Hernandez and a second by Director Eltharp, and I will conduct a roll call vote. Director Pennick? Are you on mute?
I guess so. Yes.
Thank you. Director Eltharp?
Yes.
Director Boyd Hodgson?
No.
Director Hernandez?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. The motion passes 4-1. Thank you, everybody.
President Sinella, if I can interrupt, I just noticed that we have a hand raised from a member of the public. I first noticed it during Tish Burge's presentation. I didn't get a chance to say anything before we went into the consent calendar, so I'll leave it to you whether you want me to call on that speaker at this point in time.
Yes, please.
Okay. Speaker, go ahead. Telephone number ending in 482.
They're on mute.
Yeah, I don't.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I've been trying to get into the Zoom since about 5 minutes to 5, and still I'm not able to get in. I do want to say hello to the board members. First of all, I want to mention that no material other than the overhead calculation has been made available to the public from the June 28th Finance Committee meeting. Then regarding item 3.7 revised debt management policy resolution. Number 1, at the June 28th Finance Committee meeting, you would not add a provision to the reserve policy for addressing negative restricted reserve balances because staff or committee members said it was already addressed in the debt policy. It is not addressed in the debt policy. I request that the reserve policy be brought to the full board for this and other revisions. Number 2, Section 2 mentions the district's master plan is updated at least every 5 years or more frequently when necessary. This is a prudent policy and an existing one, not a proposed revision. Your current master plan was based on data from 2008 through 2014, commenced in 2014, and originally scheduled to be completed in 2015. A new one should have been started no later than last year, but was not. In fact, you have no plans, you have no budget provision for the next 10 years for a master plan. You are not in compliance with this policy. Please don't simply delete this provision to avoid fiscal prudence. Please keep it as is and add an agenda item to the next board meeting for a budget revision to contract for a new master plan this year. Number 3, Section 2, page 2 of the policy states, the district will seek to pay for all capital projects from current revenues and available reserves prior to or in combination with the use of debt. For at least 8 years, this district has been paying for a portion of growth-related capital projects with ratepayer reserves. Ratepayer reserves are not available to pay for growth-related capital projects in accordance with your reserve policy and the California Constitution. Again, please don't simply delete this provision. Instead, adhere to it. Go forth with your plans to issue debt and stop using ratepayer money to finance growth. Number 4, also in Section 2 of the policy states, capital facility fees will be maintained at a level sufficient to finance a portion of growth-related capital costs and cover related annual debt service requirements. I believe a portion of needs to be stricken. Capital facility fees should cover the full impacts of growth. Number 5, my final point. In Section 3, one of the district objectives, ensure ratepayer equity, was disregarded when the district used ratepayer money to finance growth-related capital costs. That money could have been used to offset the revenue requirement and to reduce our water and sewer rates. Again, please don't strike this objective, just simply comply with it from now on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. And I apologize that you were unable to get on earlier.
I'm still not able to get on the Zoom.
Okay, I don't know if there's somebody from our IT staff, Lynn, that can maybe reach out and help. I don't know if that's possible.
I've
But
had a message to
This is, I apologize, this is Matthias from IT. I have been communicating with Ms. Martin, and I plan on continuing here after her comment.
thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Ms. Martin. Okay, we'll move on in our agenda here tonight. We have item 2.1, which is a public hearing. And as you know, we handle these a little bit differently. So I'm gonna go ahead and kick us off on this item. This is the time and place for a hearing to consider adoption of a resolution of the Vallecitos Water District approving the sewer service fees to be collected on the tax roll for Improvement District A for the fiscal year July 1, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. Notice of the public hearing was published in the Union Tribune on July 1st and July 8th, 2021. The public hearing is now open. General Manager Broom, would you please provide details?
Sure. So President Snella and members of the board, this is a pretty routine item that the board acts on every year. And it pertains to the collection of service fees for wastewater customers who are not also water customers of the district. And although it is a routine item, it does require a public hearing. And Finance Manager Owen will walk the board through this item. So Wes, why don't you take it away?
Good evening, President Snell, members of the board. And General Manager Pruitt pretty much covered the whole item. This is an annual item that is a continuation of the item we had on June 16th, in which the board elected to continue to collect the wastewater customers of Improvement District A on the tax roll. And that was approved through Resolution 1593, which was electing the method. And this serves as a public hearing to approve the collection of that method of collection. So you're approving the actual collection now, and to send the information with the amounts to be collected to the county. So with that, staff recommends adopting the resolution approving the collection of the tax roll.
Thank you, Wes. At this time, do any of my colleagues on the board of directors have any questions for staff? I don't see any hands. Okay. Does any member of the public have any questions for staff? If so, please indicate your desire to speak by using the raised hand function and state your name and address for the record and state your question for comment. Do we have any comments out there, Glenn?
No, we did not receive any comments by mail or email, and none of the attendees to the meeting have indicated a desire to make a comment at this time.
Great. So no written comments either, right?
Nope.
Great. There being no other persons wishing to address the board, the hearing is closed. And I'll ask a second time, does any board member of the board, does any member of the board of directors have any questions or discussion? I don't see any. Okay. Does any member of the board wish to move the adoption of the resolution of the board of directors of Vallecitos Water District approving the collection of sewer service fees on the tax roll for Improvement District A for fiscal year July 1, 2021 to June 30th, 2022?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Director Boyd Hodgson. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Panic.
Okay, thank you, Director Pinnock. So we have a motion to approve and a second. A motion to approve by Director Boyd Hodgson and a second by Director Pinnock. And I'll go ahead and conduct a roll call vote. Director Elthart.
Yes.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Yes.
Director Hernandez.
Yes.
Director Pinnock.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to our regularly scheduled agenda. We'll move on to our action items, which is item 3.1. It's referring to the closed captioning update for the board and our committee meetings. And I'll turn that over to you, General Manager Pro.
Yeah, thank you, President Snella. So the district has recently been experimenting with closed captioning services for its board and committee meetings. And Chris Robbins will now provide the board presentation and give the staff's recommendation on what we want to do with closed captioning services moving forward. So Chris, take it away.
Thank you, General Manager Pruitt. Good evening, board members, President Snella. Just real quick, we did have a test of the software application from Verbit for review by the board and some committees. The cost for and commitment for it ranges between $15,000 and $25,000 per year. We also currently we're using the Zoom app to provide closed captioning. The quality of it probably isn't up to the standard of the Verbit services, but it's also for free. Customers can also use closed captioning on YouTube if that's where they turn to watch board videos. The public, the P3 committee on July 12th reviewed this topic and agreed with staff's recommendation to just continue to use the free application Zoom for closed captioning services. And that's the recommendation, is just to use the free services at this time.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate the update. Is there any discussion or questions from my colleagues? Flip through everybody here. If I'm missing somebody, then please just chime in. I'm having some difficulties here.
I just want to thank Director Pennock for his work with me on this initiative, and Chris Robbins and the rest of the P3 committee. This is something that really opens access for more of our ratepayers. And I'm really proud that we tackled it, and the thorough research that the staff has done across all different options. I'm glad we're going to move forward, and the Zoom captions aren't perfect, but they'll do. And the incremental value in the perfection of the closed captioning between free versus $15,000 is not a good buy for our ratepayers. So thank you, Director Pennock. Thank you, Chris. Thank you to the rest of the P3 committee. This is an important step in accessibility and enabling our folks to more fully participate in meetings.
Great. Well, thank you. And I echo thank you to the committee members that worked on this and staff who supported them. Appreciate it. Any other comments before we move on?
President Sinella, we do have a hand raised by, I believe it's Gail Martin.
Okay. Please go ahead and turn on her mic.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Martin.
Can you hear me at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, I do also want to thank all of you for this effort. I believe it would be better if everyone could speak a little bit slower so the system can capture the words better. And I also would like the staff to again be aware that when the captioned words are being presented on the screen, it blocks out about 5 to 6 of the last lines at the bottom of the screen. So when you are discussing something on the screen, that information and numbers disappear. They are not visible. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. Director Boyd Hodgson, you have your hand raised.
So there is a way to get around that. And it's really something that I just happened to discover when I was playing around with it. All you have to do is mouse over where the captions are being revealed on your screen and drag it. You can actually move where the captions are appearing on your screen so that if it is interfering with a PowerPoint presentation, you can move it around a little bit. So that could help facilitate or accommodate that issue.
Well, that's great. I didn't know that. Thank you. Thanks for the question, Ms. Martin, and thanks for the answer, Director Boyd Hodgson. I learned something new. And any other questions, comments? Great. Okay, we'll move on to item 3.2, water supply condition update. Is that you, Director or General Manager Broom, or are you going to turn that over to
I'll
somebody
turn it
else?
over, but I'll do a real quick introduction. So the water supply conditions throughout the state are really of great interest to Vallecitos and its customers. And clearly this year is off to kind of a rocky start. Staff is committed already to providing the board with monthly updates on the changing water supply conditions. And Chris Robbins is going to provide an update on their latest conditions to the board tonight. So Chris, go ahead.
Thanks, General Manager Proem. I'm going to keep this one quick as County Water Authority Assistant General Manager Berg already talked about this a little bit, but she did mention that Governor Gavin Newsom added 9 counties to the regional drought emergency. San Diego County was not included in that. He did ask for Californians to take action and reduce water usage by 15% voluntarily. There is talk of a possible return of a La Nina condition, which really won't help the U.S. West very much. That's kind of bad news. Some additional information that's worth noting is the Lake Oroville is at 30% of capacity, and the San Luis Reservoir is also at 30% of capacity. And then Lake Mead is currently at 35% full, and Lake Powell at 45% full. So Locally, the weather for the 3-month temperature outlook shows San Diego above normal favored, meaning we'll probably have higher temperatures than usual. And, should actual drought be declared, we'll include a fiscal impact in these monthly reports. And I'm open to take whatever questions anybody might have, any board members might have.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Any questions by my colleagues? I don't see anything. Hey, Chris, not really a question, but just maybe a request. As we go through this drought situation, which I think we'd all agree is it's here, but it's going to get worse before it gets better. If you learn or hear of anything that maybe some other districts are doing to be a little bit more proactive, and I always struggle. We want to encourage our folks to conserve, but also mindful that at least here in San Diego, there's been a tremendous amount of financial investment made to kind of help us get through these tough times when it's really dry. But if you hear of anything that our peers are doing, to kind of proactively get the message out, if they're doing any sort of fun activities or like kind of like our landscape contest, for example, that really kind of in a kind of a casual, fun way promotes conservation. I would love to hear about it if you could bring it back to us. I do think we all get tired of the news cycle, and you hear the governor say that we're in a drought, and you hear he's not. What does 15% even mean? I don't even know how I would save 15% on my water usage. I turn my sprinklers down, change my landscape, that kind of stuff. But I mean, what does that equate to me personally? And I don't, and I say me personally, but I mean every individual that we serve. What does 15% even look like, right? And so, if there's a way that we can do that in a fun, informative way, I'd certainly be interested in learning more about that.
I appreciate the comments, President Sanella, and your timing on the comments is very good. Alicia is putting the finishing touches on our landscape contest winners, and she's got a video that we will share soon. And I think you'll all like it very much, and it's a good opportunity for us to show what some of our neighbors have done.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands up, so we'll move. This was for information only. So we'll move on to item 3.3. As needed engineering services task order award for the Las Posas water line replacement project. And General Manager Prum, you want to introduce this item, please?
Yeah, I'll just do it real quickly. So oftentimes we find ourselves in need of additional services from a technical perspective to help design some of our projects. So tonight, Ryan Morgan is going to make a presentation regarding one of our water lines scheduled for replacement that will rely on external services. So Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you, General Manager Prum. Good evening, President Sanella and directors of the board. Very excited to bring this item tonight to the board for as needed engineering services, a task order award for the Las Posas waterline replacement project. Just crudely illustrated in yellow on your screen, you can see the existing storm drain structure. It's an existing concrete box culvert located in Las Posas Road at Linda Vista Drive. In the blue line work shown in the yellow hatch box is the location of the Las Posas water line, which was a 1981 water line when it was originally installed. It goes underneath the concrete box culvert and comes out the other side over here as it's heading southbound on Las Posas. Back on December 7th of 2016, this water line ruptured at this location, about 2 feet from within the concrete box culvert. District staff utilized the equipment they had. They pushed the equipment to the extent of their capabilities at the time to perform a temporary repair. the repair is actually seen at the bottom right corner of the graphic on your screen. This repair was only intended to be temporary in nature and was budgeted for in future years. Currently, the permanent replacement of this temporary repair is budgeted for in the district's fiscal year 21-22 budget. So on April 26, 2021, staff solicited a request for proposals from two of our as-needed civil engineering firms, NV5 and Murray Smith, based on prior experience and requisite knowledge in similar infrastructure design work. Firms were asked to provide a scope of work and fee to evaluate, design, and prepare contract documents for this project. Background information was provided and proposals were developed and submitted to the district. On June 2nd, 2021, staff received those proposals from both firms. Staff worked in reviewing the proposals for completeness, and it was decided that NV5 was to be selected as the most responsive consultant with a total fee of $79,246. A couple of days after that, on June 7th, 2021, staff presented this item, including the project background and objectives, to the Engineering and Equipment Committee. Staff will provide active management services for the project, including a review of consultant designs, preparation of specifications and bid documents, and also construction management and inspections during construction. As mentioned previously, the project is identified in the current year budget. The total project budget is $503,000. Funding for the Las Posas waterline replacement project will come entirely from water replacement funds. The fiscal impact is identified on page 168 of your board packet, showing the total budget of $503,000 and the planning and design services for NV5 just shy of $80,000. We also have estimated staff services for design and construction phase, including estimated overhead and materials, which puts our estimated total just over $500,000. We estimate a small budget surplus at this phase on this project. Moving forward, we will have actual numbers to replace those estimated ones you see in the fiscal impact. So for recommendations, staff with support of the Engineering and Equipment Committee recommends that the Board of Directors authorize the General Manager to execute a task order with NV5 from the as-needed civil engineering consultants list in the amount of $79,246 for final design and professional engineering services for the project. If there are any questions, I could take those at this time.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions by my colleagues?
Just one question, I guess.
Yep.
Thanks, Ryan. Is there a reason, I mean, what's keeping us from doing this in-house? Is it staff? Is it know-how? Is it cheaper? Is it more cost-effective to go outside? Why don't we do something like that 80K inside?
Sure, that's a good question. To focus time and resources on the design work of this project would take away from other project demands, essentially. We could perform this work. We could work with a surveyor and put together a set of design plans and bid it out ourselves, but that would take away from other demands that we have currently that we're also currently working on. So while this project is a priority and it's critical infrastructure that needs to be permanently repaired since 2016, it's not of such a priority that we're going to invest our own internal resources and take away some of those resources from other also important infrastructure improvement projects.
Gotcha. Okay, and this is just for future knowledge as well. And it's just a repair, right? It's not like a new design, or is there a full-on new design?
We have options. We have alternative options to either repair the line. We could rehabilitate the existing line that goes underneath the culvert. We also have an option to look at bringing the pipeline up and actually put it into the street if there's enough clearance between the top of the concrete culvert and the road, the finished elevation of the road. That's something we're going to look at.
Okay,
That could
so that's not decided.
substantially-
Okay, that's the purpose of the planning and design feature is to see the options.
There's some studying to do, and ultimately we'll come up with the best approach forward that not only meets the district's needs, but is economical. And that may very well be putting it over the culvert, but we don't know that at this time. So some of that evaluation is all flushed out in the preliminary design. And once we know what we're doing, we will march forward through final design and take it out to bid.
Gotcha.
And
Thank you.
Director Pennick, if I can add, we run a pretty lean shop in terms of bodies, and there's only 3 full-time people assigned to the CIP group. So they're working on a lot of other things. And that's one of the reasons that we have these as-needed consultant contracts. We do this in advance so that we can easily select from a pre-qualified group of engineering firms to quickly get out there when we decide it's time to move forward with the project.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
You're on mute. Okay.
And please remind me, thank you, Brian, for this presentation, but please remind me that the cost of the actual work, the 500K that you mentioned, we have already approved the money for that project, or is that coming up next budget cycle?
That is currently approved in this year's budget. It's in the budget. And that's the total budget, which includes the construction dollars and design dollars.
That's a big project. And, you know, I read a stat just the other day that here in North County, we lost 20,000 jobs during COVID. And I wonder, just generally, when we have a big project like that and we are looking and we go out to bid to have folks do that work for us, do we have some kind of local hire agreement or mandate in place when we are choosing companies?
We do not. I don't think, James, if you want to add, we do not have a kind of buy local type of requirement or hire local requirement in our any of our ordinances or specifications.
One
That's
thing.
correct. Sorry, go ahead, Wesley. Wes,
Yeah,
go ahead.
just to interject, our purchasing policy actually does state that if we go out for bids on typical contracts or outside services, if the local company is competitive with other companies, typically we try to choose them. It's stated in the not exactly in those words, but that's what the purchasing policy says.
Really quick, just to clarify on that, that when we bid a job, it's basically the lowest, most responsive bid. So we have to follow those statutes, which are a little bit different. When we hire a consultant, it's basically the most qualified. When you bid a job, we have to follow basically state codes and the laws. And so it's basically a lowest responsive bid. When there is state funding or federal funding involved, a lot of times there may be other statutes from which are requirements, whether it's local or if it's, made in USA or some other different type of requirements. But for our jobs, we follow basically the normal statutes, which is basically state and local statutes. And that's for the bid process. So if we have a contractor and he meets all the qualifications, has all the paperwork, the bonding, and the background checks, and he's from San Francisco or from Oregon, and he gets a job, then he gets a job. When it comes to construction bids, that's the statute that we have to follow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Director Olathar. I'll second your motion to move staff's recommendation on item 3.3. If there's no other discussion, we'll conduct a roll call vote. Director Boyd Hodgson.
Yes.
Director Pennick. You're on mute.
Yes.
Director Hernandez.
Yes.
Director Olathar.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Motion passes unanimously. On to item 3.4. It's an adoption of a resolution recognizing the annexation into Vallecitos Water District of certain property designated as the Nordall Road subdivision.
Yeah, and I'll give a little preamble before turning it over to James. So as properties look to be developed within our service area, they often need to be annexed into our service area to receive water and or wastewater services. So James is going to be presenting on two such projects. Item 3.4 is the Nordall Road subdivision. And then the next item, 3.5, will be the Sunrise Oryx, but they're both about annexation. So I'll turn it over to James.
Thank you, General Manager Prum. President Sinella, members of the board. So today I'm going to be going over two items. The first one is the Nordall subdivision that's being annexed. It's just a 15-lot subdivision. And you may see sometimes, just to clear up confusion, annexations on consent. And that's mainly for setting the conditions of annexation. But when we've set the conditions for annexation, which the board approves, and then they go through the actual annexation process through LAFCO, once that's completed, we bring that back to the board for the final resolution. So these next two items, starting with the Nordall, that's the action. Now they're coming back. All the conditions have been met. And now they're coming back for the final resolution to actually be accepted within the district, whether it's a water, a sewer, or a water and sewer. So in this case, the Nordall 15-lot subdivision is within our sphere of influence. They are receiving water from VID, but they are receiving sewer from Vallecitos. VID does not provide sewer service in this area, and Vallecitos does. So you can see from the map here, the hatched area is an area which we provide sewer only. And then obviously the Nordall subdivision is a 15-lot. It's about 3.8 acres, which is being annexed. And with that, it was last seen at the board on 8/19/2020, where we set the annexation process. The history within the document, and I apologize, I should have started with this. It starts on page 174 of your board packet. The history of it shows there was a change in ownership. So actually it started well before that, but all the annexation items were set by condition with the new owner, which is the current owner, in August of last year. So now today we're bringing this item forward to basically finalize the annexation. So the expected cap fees on wastewater on this job, if it stays at the current rate, the 15 lots, will be about $195,000. All the annexation fees have been paid, and I'm going to scroll up just so I get the actual recommendation correct. So staff is recommending adoption of the resolution recognizing the annexation of the Nordall Road subdivision property into Vallecitos Water District and ordering the annexation into Sewer Improvement District 5, 6, and A. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, James. Is there any questions from the board? I don't see or hear any, so I will entertain a motion if there's no questions.
Move to approve, Hernandez.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item 3.4 as presented by staff by Director Hernandez. Is there a second? I'll second that motion this time. So we have a motion to approve item 3.4 as presented by staff by Director Hernandez and a second by Director Sinella. And if there's no other discussion, we'll conduct a vote. Okay. Director Hernandez.
Yes.
Director Elithart.
Yes.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Yes.
Director Pinnock.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to item 3.5, an adoption of resolution recognizing the annexation of Sunrise Oryx into the Vallecitos Water District and ordering the annexation into Sewer Improvement Districts 1, 2, 5, 6, and A.
Go ahead, James.
Thank you. Again, thank you to the board. This very similar, or basically it's the same action as the previous item, is the annexation of a development. Again, a lot of these annexations will be at the fringes or the edges of our boundaries since most of the stuff is developed within. So in this case, this property is located over in the Escondido area off Barham. There's the off Barham. This is the 15 entrance going east. 78 entrance going east. And you can see Mission Road here. So in this case, it's 192 multifamily units that is being proposed here. The action that's before you today is simply the annexation into our water and sewer service boundary. Rincon del Diablo, in this case, will be serving the water. And similar to the other map, this area that's hatched here is sewer only, and this property will be joining our sewer only. One property is already in, the other property will be doing sewer only as far as its annexation goes. As far as the details on this, the board approved the conditions back on April 2019. It came back to the board for an extension because to move the project forward, and all the fees have been paid. The cap fees expected for this job, and there was a typo in the staff report, so the number's wrong. It's about $1.88 million in sewer cap fees are expected from the 192 multifamily units under the current fee structure. So with that, and again, let me make sure I get the language correct. Staff is recommending adoption of the resolution recognizing the annexation of the two APNs into the Vallecitos Water District and ordering the annexation of APN 10 into the Sewer Improvement District 1, 2, 5, 6, and 8. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the board? I don't think I see any. So I will entertain a motion.
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item 3.5 as staff presented by Director Ellithorpe. Is there a second?
Second, Pinnock.
Okay, and we have a second by Director Pinnock. If there's no other discussion, we'll conduct a vote. Director Boyd Hodgson,
Yes.
Director Hernandez,
Yes.
Director Pinnock,
Yes.
Director Ellithorpe,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Motion passes unanimously. On to item 3.6, an ordinance establishing the administrative charges to recover indirect costs for fiscal year 2021, 2022.
Yeah, I'll kick this off, President Sanella. So in order to track our project costs and ensure that we are recovering our costs for services provided, the district establishes what's called an administrative charge, which gets added to the direct charges for its services. The board adopts this administrative charge annually by ordinance, and that's what we're doing tonight, is to adopt the 2021 administrative charges. And Wes Owen will walk the board through this item.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, members of the board, President Snella. My second item is also an annual item that we present after the budget is adopted. And tonight I'll be presenting on the overhead rate for fiscal year 2022. Let me see if I can share my screen to help. Please let me know if you can see that.
Yep.
Okay, great. So the agenda for tonight, first we'll talk about the purpose of the overhead rate, what it does and why we need it. Then we'll go into the background and how we develop the methodology for our overhead rate. After that, we will discuss the methodology for calculating the overhead rate. Then we'll talk about the current year calculation and compare it to prior years. And finally, we'll go over staff's recommendation. So first, the purpose. I'd like to just give a brief, like what the overhead rate does. The overhead rate, hopefully I can put it simply, basically allocates a portion of our indirect operating cost to the costs of our assets or projects that are being worked on by staff. So to put another way, if the engineering department goes out and works on a project with a contractor, their labor rate is charged to that project as well as the overhead rate. And that overhead or the overhead charges and the money from that money comes from the operating costs and is allocated to that project. So if an engineer works on a project at the district, it's not just their labor rate we're paying. There are additional costs in employing that person at the district, such as we have to have, for example, we have to have safety compliance at the district. So we have to have a safety department to employ that person. We have to have electricity costs. We have to have buildings and grounds maintenance. Those are all indirect costs that are required to employ that person. And a portion of those costs need to be allocated to projects that that person works on. So that's sort of a summary of what overhead is and what we do with it. And then next I'll talk about why it's required. So it is required because it is required by the generally accepted accounting principles. And GAP says that we must calculate overhead for the appropriate cost allocation of assets. And the actual cost of an asset is defined as the direct labor and materials costs plus the supporting costs. In addition, it eliminates the unfair burden on the ratepayers. As I mentioned, we're allocating a portion of our indirect operating costs. We're moving it from indirect operating costs to the cost of an asset or to the bill for a contractor. So by moving that operating cost, you're reducing your operating costs and therefore reducing the burden on the ratepayers or the rates charged to ratepayers. So the background methodology, how we developed our overhead rate, it was initially established, or the current method was initially established in 2013 when we hired Black & Veatch to do a cost of service study and to review our overhead rate. And Black & Veatch recommendation was that we use a single overhead rate, which would be applied to direct labor and updated every year based on the approved budget. So it changes every year, and it would be effective July 1st of each fiscal year. And the overhead rate is going to apply to contractor costs, outside contractor costs. For example, when James and his group work with an outside contractor and they dedicate staff to working with that contractor, their time is charged plus overhead. And then developer projects and miscellaneous billings. And examples of miscellaneous billings would be if someone hit a fire hydrant and they damaged our infrastructure and our operations department had to go out and replace service lines or infrastructure. The cost of that would be their labor costs plus our overhead costs. And that would be billed to, say, an insurance company or possibly an individual. So the methodology for calculating our overhead rate is our budgeted indirect costs. And those budgeted indirect costs might be the cost of the safety department or our buildings and grounds department, or say, for example, our customer services department, and as well as our employee benefits. So the healthcare costs, PERS costs, things like that are indirect costs that need to be included in the numerator of the calculation. And the denominator is our direct labor costs, or the cost for like the engineering labor department, for the labor for the engineering department, excuse me. So the current year calculation, our budgeted indirect costs and employee benefits, and this was included with the staff report. It was attached to it to show all the costs that are included in this. And the total for fiscal year 2022 and the approved budget for the budget indirect and employee benefits is $12.7 million. And our direct labor costs are $5.9 million, resulting in an overhead rate for fiscal year 2022 of 212.57%. So what that means is if we charge $1 of labor, I'll use James' department again, engineering charges $1 of labor to a project, we have to also allocate 212% or another $2.12 to that project cost. So we would be charging $3.12 to the contractor, or if it's a miscellaneous billing, to the insurance company. So how does our current rate compare to previous years? So the overhead rate has ranged from 221% in 2018, and it went down to 209% by 2021, mainly as a result of increased direct labor costs. And this year it's going up a little bit as a result of a minor increase in indirect costs from $12.4 million to $12.7 million. So with that, staff recommends adopting, if there are no questions, staff recommends adopting the ordinance for establishing the new overhead rate for fiscal year 2022.
Thank you, Wes. Appreciate the presentation and also the work that you had done to brief the Finance Committee recently on this item as well. With that, I'll open it up for any questions from the board.
One question.
Yes.
So no, thank you, Wes. Good job. I understand everything. Just in the packet, though, it says because of some one-time expense, even though it's a 212%, we're going to lower the rate to 198. Can you explain that a little bit?
That actually happened in a previous year. I think it was in 2017 or 16.
So that was that was in 15 then. Okay, I see. Okay, you got okay, never mind. Gotcha.
Yeah, we had a large IT cost that year that would have been included in the indirect costs. So it was excluded for the overhead calculation.
Gotcha. Okay. Nope. Explains it. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? If I,
Director Boyd Hodgson has her hand raised.
oh, thank
I
you.
have a couple questions.
Yes,
So I guess my first question is, why has it been since 2013 that we don't have another cost of service study? It seems like it's been a minute since we've had one of those, and I'm sure that they're involved and they take time, but it seems like it's time to do another one. And secondly, I just want to clarify. So tonight we would be voting on 212.57%, not the 198.
Correct. The 198 was I believe that was the 2014 rate that Black and Beach. That was just an excerpt from the Black and Beach cost of service study that was done in 2014 to show you that, just to demonstrate their explanation of why we established the methodology.
Thank you.
And the first question, if I remember right, was why has it been since 2014? Actually, it hasn't. That was just when it was originally established. And I tried to clarify that when I said it. If I didn't, I apologize. But our current methodology was originally established in 2013. It has been continued since then, and it has been looked at in cost of service studies every time we've done one to verify that it was appropriate.
So the cost of service study is just validating the methodology, not the benchmark of the numbers that go into the formula.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so every year we use the same methodology, but apply the approved budget numbers to develop the exact rate.
Thank you.
great. Any other comments or questions? Don't think I see any. If there is none, then I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve staff's recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item 3.6 as presented by staff by Director Boyd Hodgson. Is there a second? I'll second that motion. And so there's a motion to approve item 3.6 as presented by staff by Director Boyd Hodgson and a second by Director Sanella. And if there's no other discussion, we'll conduct a roll call vote. Director Hernandez.
Yes.
Director Pinnock.
Yes.
Director Elithart.
Yes.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item 3.7, revised debt management policy resolution.
Okay, I'll kick that off, President Sanella. So as the board knows, we're in the middle of a debt issuance process. And as part of that process, we need to update our debt management policy to be consistent with Security and Exchange Commission guidelines and other requirements of the team that's assembled to issue the debt. And Wes will present in more detail on this item.
Thank you, Glenn. Good evening again, President Snell, members of the board. For my third item of the night, I'll talk about the debt management policy revisions. And as we mentioned previously in going through the debt issuance process, we're looking at the requirements for issuing debt. And part of those requirements are SEC requirements. And I'm actually going to let Laura give more information on this because she knows it much better than I do. But from my understanding, there are 4 requirements by the SEC, and our policy met 3 of them. So we've incorporated or added a 4th item, which is internal controls to the policy. So with that, I'll pass it over to Laura to explain further. Oh, you're muted, Laura.
Yeah, we can't hear you. No.
Nope, still can't hear you.
Oh, there it says she's connected now.
Is this a better audio?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, good. Just had to switch a few things around. Good evening, President, members of the board. Thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to present to you this evening. As Wes indicated, the changes made to the dimension policy are really to become compliant with both California CDAC government code as well as the federal securities SEC law as well. What I would like to do is present the actual policy itself, walk through the changes with the board and the reasons for those changes. But to start off, the SB 1029, California Government Code, requires 4 steps to be covered in a policy whenever an issuer issues in the public market. And that went into effect in early 2017. So this was after the 2015 bonds had been issued. There was no requirement for the district to have this type of policy outstanding with those requirements back in 2015. With this new debt issuance, it does become a requirement. The 4 items that an issuer needs to have in their debt management policy and submitted for CDAC purposes is to explain the purpose of which the debt proceeds might be utilized, the types of those debt issuances. In addition, you need to have a discussion on the relationship between how the debt and how that you integrate it with other public policy matters and documentations. And then the 4th is an internal control procedures to identify how the use of the proceeds, especially for tax exempt purposes, is adequately used when issued. And that's one of the biggest edits that we've had done for a lot of our other clients. That's the 4th edit and comment that we've made into the debt management policy. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and share the black line of the existing policy so we can see what the changes were and the reasons for those changes. As we scroll through this presentation of the policy, first edit you'll see on page 3, this is a change to make it accurate for the tax code. Whenever an agency or public issuance is issued for tax exempt purposes, that long-term debt finance cannot exceed the weighted average maturity of 120% of the average useful life of the project. So that is pulled directly from the tax code. It's a true statement for this policy. We wanted to make sure that that was adequately stated here for the district. Moving along, the next big item that was changed and blacklined. We have minor comments throughout the policy to identify the finance manager as the communication and major debt administration person to proceed with any of these items identified here in the policy. Previously, it was the assistant general manager, so now it will be Wes Owen's job to communicate any of these items to the board. Here on the very first black line change on page 7, this section is that last requirement I referred to earlier for the CDF government code. It's the internal control procedures. It just requires a few extra steps to make sure that any invoices that are paid by the district through bond proceeds has a check and balance system that to ensure that proceeds are for tax exempt purposes, such as capital projects, and they're spent appropriately. These 2 paragraphs below are additional government code changes by the states for state reporting purposes, also that went into effect in 2017. So following the issuance of the 2021 COPs, the district will have to file with CDAC a few additional annual reports. This is similar to what is done currently from the prior bonds on the continuous disclosure reports, but it's just additional data that must be supplied to CDAC directly. It includes proceed details, outstanding par amounts, use of proceeds, as well as what the cost of issuance was spent on. And this last section paragraph here is representative of another government code edit where the issuer is required to supply good faith estimates to the public, which you will see in the upcoming board meeting when we talk about the bond issuance. You'll see these good faith estimates included in the resolution as required. The last section here that we will be going over for these edits is directly in connection with SEC amendments to the outstanding continued disclosure policies. So that's Rule 15C 212. There was additional amendments that were made to continued disclosure requirements that requires issuers to supply to the market and to EMA notice of any, in quotations, financial obligations. What we've done here is we worked with Stradling to prepare language on how to identify an instance of an occurrence of a financial obligation or an instance where there's been a material event in connection with such financial obligation. We've listed a couple of the items that would be classified as financial obligation. What we have done here, that was clearly outlined what general counsel and staff should be doing to bring any instance of issuance of these types of financial obligations, which could be an SRF loan, any private placement loan. For example, the 2008 loan that is currently outstanding for the district would classify as a financial obligation were it to be issued at a later time. Nothing that has already been issued to date needs to be refiled on Emma. This is a looking forward clause for anything to come for the district. So you'll see we've had some items here that classify as financial obligation, including capital leases, certain agreements, letters of credits, any governmental loans, anything that is a question would be brought before General Counsel and Bond Counsel to decide if the item needs to be submitted to Emma. Then we have a few other disclaimers, making sure all of this is properly denoted. And lastly, the secondary market disclosure was a recent bulletin prepared by the SEC to identify what a district's board and what staff members need to be aware of on matters that pertain to materiality when talking to the public. So it gives some updates of a recent disclosure made by the SEC. And that concludes the changes to the policy, and I'm happy to answer any questions. We have bond counsel on the line as well, Doug Brown and John Guz, if you have any further questions on some of these rules and regulations.
Great, thank you for the presentation. I'll open it up for questions and comments by my colleagues. I do not see or hear any comments or questions. If there is no comments or questions, then I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve, Hernandez.
Thank you, Director Hernandez. Motion to approve item 3.7 as presented by staff and our team, our consultant team. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second by Director Boyd Hodgson. If there's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and conduct a roll call vote. Director Pennick?
Yes.
Director Hernandez?
Yes.
Director Eltharp?
Yes.
Director Boyd Hodgson?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you again for the presentation. Moving on to item 3.8, debt issuance update. General Manager Prum, do you want to kick us off?
He's muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. My mic was muted. This is a simple update on the status of our 2021 debt issuance, and Wes is going to provide that update.
Good evening again. Yeah, as General Manager Prum mentioned, this item is for discussion only, but I did want to give the board a status update on the debt issuance process. So just a little background. On May 6th, the board authorized staff to move forward with contracts necessary to issue $28 million in certificates of participation. And since then, staff has actually not really contracted. We've engaged the services of Morgan Stanley as an underwriter, Stradling, Yoka, Carlson Roth as the bond and disclosure counsel, as well as US Bank for the trustee services for the debt proceeds. The first draft of all of the legal documents, and there are many of them, they're currently under review. And the initial draft of the preliminary official statement has been included in the board packet for the board's review. It's a very lengthy document, and it will make up a portion of the bond covenants when we have completed the process. So if the board would like to, hopefully that's enough time. We're planning on, we wanted to distribute it now so you'd have time before the August 4th board meeting to review it and provide any comments or questions. At that time, we'll be happy to answer any of those questions or address the comments so that we can make changes or whatever we need to do before we distribute the preliminary official statement. Another thing worth noting is that staff received training from Bond Disclosure Council on disclosure responsibilities under the federal securities law. And this training was done on June 9th of 2021. And the district and the district's municipal advisors were actually scheduled to present to Fitch and S&P today. So we did that today. It's been a long day of presentations for staff and for Feldman and Rollout. We had two of those today, about an hour and a half each, but we believe that it went well with both Fitch and S&P, and we're expecting to receive those ratings on the week of August 2nd. So keep your fingers crossed that we get a AAA rating. I pushed for it, you know, everybody will attest to that. And then staff anticipates that at the August 4th board meeting, The board will receive a resolution authorizing the debt issuance, the preliminary official statement, and other legal documents necessary to issue the bonds. After that, we'll distribute the preliminary official statement. And the bonds will price on August 12th and they will close on August 19th, at which time we will receive the bond proceeds. That concludes my update. And as I said, it's just for discussion only, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Wes. Any questions from the board at this time? Make my way through. I don't see any and I don't hear any. So,
Quick question.
oh, sorry,
Is
Director
this
Fennick.
a 20-year obligation? What's the terms on that? Is it 20-year?
It's a 30-year obligation. And
30-year?
Yes. And it's currently estimated, and this is a current estimate, it keeps changing, so we won't know until they're actually priced. But the current estimate is the all-in true cost of 2.46%. True
Okay.
interest cost.
And it's 30-year, no prepayment issues or anything?
Nope. It is a wrap debt structure though, which means that it'll basically we'll pay less in the first few years because our 2015, the payments decrease in 2030. So we'll have less of a payment to help with the debt burden on the first few years. And then after that, this one will go up and the 2015 will go down. So overall, it has less impact on the debt on the district as far as debt service payments.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah. Don't think I see any. Okay, so then this is just presented for discussion, so there's no action needed. And we'll move on to item 3.9. The California Association of Sanitation Agencies election designation of agency representative and consent to electronic transmission. Do you want to provide some background on that? General Manager Prune, please.
I will. Thank you, President Sanella. So as the board knows, we're a member agency of CASA, the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. And CASA is looking to fill 4 vacancies on its board of directors. They have a nominating committee, which has put forth the name of 4 candidates to fill those seats. And that slate has been approved by the CASA board. The board packet names the 4 candidates, but of note is that one of our directors, Craig Elitharp, has been nominated to serve on the CASA board. So that's exciting. The election will take place at the CASA annual business meeting to be held during the CASA conference. And that business meeting will be on August 12th. Director Elitharp is our current CASA representative and would cast the ballot on the district's behalf typically. If there are any comments any of the other directors would like Director Elitharp to consider before casting the ballot, tonight would be a good opportunity for those to be heard. In addition to voting on the slate of candidates, the ballot also includes an item to approve the CASA dues resolution, which is what CASA charges its member agencies to fund their programs. And their due schedule is the same as it was last year, so there are no increases from last year, which is really good. CASA is also looking for Vallecitos' consent in order to receive official communications to and from CASA electronically. So that there's a form we have to submit on that. And finally, CASA is looking for the designation of Vallecitos' agency representatives. So as I mentioned before, Director Elitharp is our primary agency representative. Our official designation sheet for agencies and subcommittees does not list alternatives 1 and 2 for CASA. I believe Director Hernandez has been acting in that capacity as an alternative for CASA, but it would be best for our board to formalize that assignment and assign us a first and a second alternate so that we can provide that information to CASA. And before I turn it over to President Sanella, I just want to congratulate Director Elitharp on his nomination. So with that, back to you, President Sanella.
Thank you, General Manager Prum, and congratulations, Director Elitharp. Craig, I don't know, did you want to say anything, or are you okay with us having some discussion at this time?
No, just to clarify, I have been on the board for the past 3 years. I started the terms are 3-year terms for each director. So I got on the board in 2018, and I'm actually up for re-election now. So I had indicated to the CASA executive director that I was getting too busy and I wouldn't seek reelection, but he he talked me into staying for one more term. So they added me to the slate of candidates for the upcoming election, and I plan on serving one more term.
Okay, well, thank you for your service. Any questions or discussion from the board? Don't think I see or hear any. Now, the second part of this, the alternate positions. Jim, do you want to say anything, or Jim Hernandez, do you want to say anything about, do you want to continue being an alternate? I don't know, is it even up to us?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but if I have the opportunity to be an alternate, I'd like to be the alternate.
So President Sinella, it is up to us. Each agency gets to identify their primary representative and 2 alternates. And now that's different from being on the board. So they just want to know who our primary and who our alternates are. So it is completely up to us.
Okay, do any of the other board members have an interest in serving either as a primary or an alternate?
I could serve as a second alternate.
Okay, thank you for
not truly knowing what that entails, but be happy to.
Okay, thank you for volunteering. Any other discussion, interest, questions? Okay, so then I suspect we need a motion that would include supporting Director Elitharp for the primary position and the slate of candidates that was put forth by CASA, and then Directors Hernandez and Pinnock as our first and second alternates. Did I capture everything, Glenn?
Yeah, I think so. And the other part is allowing us to authorize them to give electronic, that's understood, and I can fill out that form. So.
Yeah, I think in 2021 we can handle email.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I move to approve the slate of candidates, including Director Elitharp. Congratulations, with Director Hernandez as primary alternate and Director Pinnock as secondary alternate, as well as electronic communications. Did I get it? Is that all?
Awesome.
I think that's
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the motion, Director Boyd Hodgson, on item 3.9. Is there a second?
You can second that, Pinnock.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion to approve item 3.9 by Director Boyd Hodgson and a second by Director Pinnock, and we'll conduct a roll call vote. Director Elitharp.
Yes.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Yes.
Director Hernandez.
Yes.
Director Pinnock.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Motion passes unanimously. Whew. That concludes our action items tonight. Let's move on to reports. Item 4.1, General Manager Report.
Yeah, I'll try to go quick, just a few items. So I wanted to let the board and the public know that our maintenance crews will be out performing some valve turning maintenance work tonight. We do this work at night on higher volume streets to minimize the impact on traffic. The crews will be on portions of Twin Oaks Valley Road, San Alejo Road, and San Marcos Boulevard. There may be some short-term lane reductions, but no full road closures or big detours. And next Wednesday night, July 28th, we will be performing some sewer cleaning operations along Las Posas Avenue for similar reasons and with similar impacts to traffic. The second item has to do with San Marcos Boulevard update, and reported before that all lanes of traffic were open, and just when you thought it was safe to go back onto San Marcos Boulevard, there is still some additional work that needs to be done along San Marcos Boulevard associated with our San Marcos Interceptor job. We will be doing some sewer rehab and lining work out there beginning the week of August 2nd. In the lane, there will be some lane closures to the outside or rightmost westbound lane until August 13th. We'll also be abandoning an existing sewer line in McMar, which is on the south side of San Marcos Boulevard, the week of August 9th through 13th. The good news is all of the new line is in. So the 42-inch line is in. The work has been basically accepted by staff, and sewage is actually flowing through the line. We expect to bring the formal acceptance to the board in late August, early September for acceptance of the contract work. So that's good news. Unfortunately, there's a little bit more traffic disruption on San Marcos Boulevard, but the end is in sight. And the last thing I wanted to say was really good news, I think. I just want to let the board know that we have substantially completed the refunds to all of our customers from the money that we received from the Water Authority Metropolitan Water District lawsuit judgment. So I say substantially, we haven't gotten 100%, but to date, we've sent refunds to 99.3% of eligible customers, refunding a total of $1,579,631.86. There are a few outstanding refunds we're working through. There's some complications, and mostly it's people that were customers as of the cutoff date, and now they're no longer customers. So we have to track some people down and things like that. But for the most part, we're almost at 100%. And I just want to congratulate staff. This has been a really difficult, seemingly simple, but in actuality, very difficult effort. And the staff did a great job to get it out. And I want to, again, acknowledge the board's actions to get the money back in the hands of our customers. So that's all I have tonight, President Sinella.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Appreciate it. And thanks for everybody's efforts on that very important project and initiative. Moving on to item 4.2, District Legal Counsel report.
First, let me thank the board for extending our contract. I appreciate your confidence. The other item I want to report on, I had some questions about gifts and honoraria. So just to remind you all, you're limited to accepting gifts from a single source in any calendar year to the amount of $520. So that a gift is any payment or other benefit conferred upon you for which you don't provide payment or services in equal or greater value. There is an exception for when you speak at an event. If you're making a speech at an event, you can receive free admission and food, and what the FPPC terms a nominal item, a pen, a pencil, a mouse pad, some type of nominal gift. Otherwise, it would be prohibited as an honorarium, which is prohibited from accepting as an elected official. That's all I have to report, President Sinella. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gopin. Appreciate the refresher. Moving on to 4.3, the San Diego County Water Authority update. Craig?
Yeah, thank you, President Sinella. I'll try to be brief in the interest of time here, but the Water Authority held its regular Board of Directors meeting for June on June 24th, along with all of its committees. So the major actions that happened at the board meeting, the board approved 2-month extension to the existing 6-month temporary eligibility period granted by the board to previous transitional special agricultural water rate program customers for access to the permanent special agricultural water rate program. Tish mentioned that this evening during her presentation. The board also adopted resolution 2021-17, approving the general manager's recommended budget for fiscal years 2022 and 2023 for operations and capital improvements and appropriating $1.694 billion consistent with the approved budget. The other major budget action, the board adopted the Water Authority's rates and charges for calendar year 2022. And finally, the board authorized the general manager to execute an 18-month contract for federal advocacy services with Foley and Lardner under retainer of $12,000 a month for a total compensable contract amount of $227,250 and this is for federal lobbying services. And I'll quit right there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Althart. Moving on to items 4.4, Encina Wastewater Authority. Anything to report at this time, Director Hernandez?
Yes, we had our capital committee meeting this morning at 7:30. We discussed the outfall survey, which takes place every 2 years with a full inspection every 6 years. This is the year for the full inspection. It happens at nighttime. They actually send a vehicle, unmanned vehicle, down the pipe all the way to the end of the pipeline, structurally looking at the outside. They have divers going down in the water, inspecting the going down the inside. And then they have divers going on the outside. Then the repair of the secondary clarifier is complete, and they're moving on to clarifier 3. We had needed, as needed contractor awarded to SS Mechanical and Orion Construction for the next 2 years, not to exceed $1.5 million per year, with a project no more than $450,000. Anything above 50,000 must be approved by the board. And final acceptance of minor rehabilitation of Buena Vista Pump Station and the Carl Bed Water Facility. And that was the end of the agenda.
Thank you, Director Hernandez. The Policy and Finance Committee for Encina also met last week. It was a relatively short meeting. The primary subject matter included a presentation from our auditing firm, much like we're going through here at Vallecitos. Encina is going to go through their independent audit, and we had the auditor who's going to be performing it for us give us an update and as to the timeline, the schedule, what they're going to be looking into, and what the scope of the audit is and what they don't look into. And it's almost an identical template, almost presentation as to what we received from our auditor, even though they're 2 different firms. I will say, the name of the auditing firm for Encina escapes me at the moment, but I'll look up in my notes and send it over to you, Glenn. But I seemed really impressed with them, and with our auditing firms, we switch those out fairly frequently, just to have different sets of eyes look at what's going on with the district. And the next time that we do switch out, I think this firm that Encina uses is not one that I recognize, nor is it one that I believe we've used since I've been on the board. But I think I was pretty impressed from a first impression standpoint, and might be worthy of inviting to bid next time we go out to bid.
And President Sinella, Gail Martin does have her hand raised. It just went up. I don't know what you want to do with that, but just wanted you to be aware.
Let's let the Miss Martin speak.
Go ahead, Miss Martin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you, please, since I have to follow on the phone, could you all please say what page you're on in the agenda as the meeting occurs? Because I have no idea where you are in the meeting because I'm on the phone still. We still can't get me into the Zoom, so I have no idea where you are in the screen. So I'm just asking, please, that you call out and say what page you're on as the meeting progresses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that was item 4.4. And on my agenda, it's page 6. So item 4.4 on page 6. Now we're moving on to item 4.5 on page 6. And this is standing committees. And I'll open it up to any of the standing committees that may have met since the last time we met, and who would like to provide an update. Do we have any updates?
Yep. Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Oh, okay, yeah, Director Elthar. There's the hands.
Well, Director Boyd Hodgson's hand was up first if she wants to go.
I have no preference. However you guys would like to work it out.
All right, I'll go ahead. The Engineering and Equipment Committee met on July 12th. Real quick, the items that we discussed: a project review for Palisades Estates Phase 1 and Phase 2, escrow agreement. Second item was an asset management plan update. Third was Sunrise Oryx update, which we heard as one of the annexation items on tonight's agenda. We got a district-wide solar power update, and then a couple projects, actually several project updates for the Meadowlark reclamation facility. One was a conversion project for converting from chlorine gas to sodium hypochlorite. And the other was a miscellaneous projects update for the Metal Arc site for several different projects. I'll end it there.
Okay. Thank you, Director Elithart. Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you. The P3 committee met on July the 12th, and we closed the loop on some of the ongoing old business issues, including the closed captioning. And I'm very proud of that work and grateful that we've been able to implement that. One of the things that we have been talking about in this committee is setting up some kind of partnership to enable more kiddos as well as young adults and college age folks becoming more interested in water and providing a pathway for them to become knowledgeable and trained to work in water, given the number of jobs that are going to be available very soon. So we continue that work. I'm working with Chris, and we're partnering with Palomar College. We're actually meeting again tomorrow to try to formalize and talk about some of the barriers that might preclude us being able to form an internship partnership. But we're working on that. It's exciting news, and there might be an update on that coming soon, maybe in the next couple of months. And the next meeting will be August the 9th. We usually meet the first Monday of the month, but I'm going to be out of town. So we're going to meet August the 9th. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And the Finance Committee met way back in on June 28th, and we had a full docket on our agenda. We also had a presentation from our Vallecitos auditor, Davis Farr, and we've used them now for, I think, at least the last 2 years. And I've been impressed with them as well. They've done a great job in prior years. I anticipate they're going to do a good job for us again this year. And of course, they'll be coming to the full board here in the near future to present, their what they're doing for us and also their findings. And the one thing that Director Boyd Hodgson, who serves on the committee with me, and I, it was brought up during the Finance Committee that typically the Finance Committee will come up with one area within the district that we ask the auditor to kind of scratch a little deeper on outside of their regular kind of routine things that they check. And we haven't come up with that item yet, but if we do, and we don't always do it, that we don't have to do it, but it's something that we've done in the past, and it's kind of a nice little extra value add that we can get out of the auditor, especially if we have any either concerns or even if they're not concerns, but we just want to learn a little bit more about something. We'll have them do that for us. So if we end up picking something like that, we'll definitely share it with the full board at that time. We had the same presentation, maybe a little bit more in depth that on the overhead rates that Wes had provided to us. So I'll skip over that one since you've already heard it. We also had the update on the debt issuance. So I'll skip over that. We had an in-depth conversation about our reserve policy once again. And I think you've all been well versed in that over the last couple of meetings as well. And then we have an update on our past due accounts with regards to folks that may be struggling due to the pandemic. And so a fairly long, robust meeting for the Finance Committee, but it was definitely informative and beneficial. Any other standing committees that I met or missed? Okay. Moving on to item 4.6 on page 6 of the agenda packet. Director's reports on meetings, conferences, and seminars attended. I have not attended anything. Does anybody have anything that they would like to report out on? Okay, just double check for hands. I don't see any hands. So if I missed you, just speak up. But if not, then we'll go ahead and carry on.
I have just something very quickly. I was a panelist on the North County Climate Change Alliance, and the discussion was around a documentary called River's End, which I highly recommend for folks to watch. It centers on, where California water comes from. It's, the documentarians definitely had a bias, and that was, it was very clear what the bias was in the film, but it did contain a lot of information that I found interesting and helpful as far as a background on California water and how we are, how water flows through the state. I was offered a tree planted in my name as an honorarium, and I declined that as much as I would like to have it. But that was also the impetus behind the honorarium report by Mr. Gilpin.
Okay, great, thank you. Moving on to item 5.1 on page 6. It's it's other business, and this is just the notification for the board that the California Association of Sanitation Agencies annual conference is coming up. It's going to be here in San Diego at the Hilton Bayfront Hotel. I think that hotel sold recently. I don't think it's a Hilton anymore, but that's August 11th through the 13th. And so if you're interested, please let Ann know so she can make the appropriate arrangements for you. I don't think we need any action on that. And then any item 6.1 on page 6 of the agenda packet, director's comments or future agenda items. Anything from the board?
Yeah, I have.
Yes,
I have some.
Director Althar?
Yeah, I meant to make a comment way back on the consent calendar items, but item 1.4, the O&M quarterly metrics report. I just wanted to thank Glenn and his staff for providing an additional report. And it's on page 72 if anyone's interested. And it's titled the Wastewater Flow Summary. I'd asked that to be added just to better clarify the disposition of wastewater flows from month to month, and it really cleared it up for me. And I want to thank Glenn and Ed Pedrazi in particular for providing that additional report. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Althar. Director Boyd Hodgson.
I have an ask, and I wonder, I'm not sure what the proper protocol would be to do this, but you know, when we come to these meetings and we receive presentations, I find that sometimes after the meetings, I ask for the presentation so that I can review it for my own understanding. And I don't know if other directors are doing that. I also have constituents that ask, you know, will that presentation be available? I wonder if it's possible that whenever there's a presentation made during a meeting, that it is just amended to the board packet online so that anybody who wants to get it can just get it. And that way, you know, staff doesn't have to send it out to multiple different people that ask for it. You know, I don't have to ask staff if I have a constituent that wants to go through me to get it. I wonder if that would be possible.
Yeah, I can answer that, President Sanella. Absolutely. So I can work with our IT department and maybe add a column to the upcoming meetings, because right now it shows the agenda, the video, the minutes, and we can add a column to say somewhere in there we can add any attachments so that people can go back and grab them. So,
thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
All right, thank you. Any other board director comments or future agenda items? I don't see or hear any. And with that, we are at item 7.1 on page 6 of the agenda packet, and that is adjournment. And so we were going to adjourn this evening. Thank you, everybody, for your participation and your input tonight. Productive meeting, and thank you to those who came and presented to us and those who came from the public. We appreciate your attendance. Thank you so much. Have a good night.